The Lord.
I kick ass for
As
the
you
Lord.
should. Good time too.
Never loved him the way that I love you. Just drops the mic there.
Hit me with his butt.
Good afternoon, good evening to every one of you. Thank you for joining today's stream. If you're catching this at another time, that's okay too. We're happy to have you here. We're happy to see all of you and catch you however you are listening or watching or whatever you're doing here. So, welcome on in. My name is Cody Waits. I am the host of the podcast. It's called 52/1993. It's a discussion, podcast discussion about movies from the year 1993. So, what we do here is we watch movies from this year, obviously from the title, and I choose these movies based on important movies that were released this year by and I do it by weekend releases. So we're kind of going in order. We're a little bit ahead of schedule right now. We're in the month of May for some of these movies, but we'll have a backlog. Tends to be in like the summer where we're gonna catch on like 3 or 4 movies for the exact same weekend. Then the winter, the and fall and winter, we're gonna have a lot of like more Oscar movies or more important movies that way. So we're gonna hit a lot on the same weekend release here. So, if you are a listener or somebody that has joined me before, you'll notice I'm in a different location. I am house sitting this week, so I had to kind of move my equipment and things to my sister and brother-in-law's house for the week. So this will be a one-time away from home uh, journey that we're about to go on here. So hopefully everything works properly. You can hear me okay, and hopefully there's no issues with the stream or anything like that. I doubt it. I think it's actually doing better here than it is at my own home. Another thing I want to talk about is the movies that we choose. I choose them based on how, like I said, they're important movies. How much they made at the box office. I think I scattered in the top 20 films from this year. Box office wise, I also chose some movies that I just felt like were culturally relevant to the time, and then some other movies that I just thought were fun or needed to be talked about this year because this is a really great year. It's often called the year of the family movie. So there are a lot of PG or G-rated films this year, and I've sprinkled those in as well to talk about. And I usually have a guest on to talk about the movie and then interview them about their interests in the movies and what their favorite movies are over the years, things like that. Today is going to be a different one, and it might end up being a shorter pod. I do not have a guest this week for the podcast, so that's what we're doing. We're just going solo this week, and that's completely okay. I think we'll still have a good time, especially if you're in chat and you've seen this movie and watched this movie. Please throw out some questions or things that you liked about the movie if you've seen it before, or just any general questions to let us know that you're there. So. Uh, this week's movie, I'll go ahead and drop into this week's movie. We're choosing a movie, a political comedy, I would say. It has a little bit of rom com to it, but it's mostly a political comedy, uh, light on the politics and light on the reality. It's more of a fantasy movie in that regard, which could often turn people off with its saccharineness, its sweetness, I think. But this week's movie we're doing is called Dave. And this movie was released on May 7th, 1993. It was directed by Ivan Reitman, who you may be familiar with some of his movies. He did the Ghostbuster movies. He did Stripes. Frequently works with Bill Murray. And the writer of this, actually a writer that of some great movies that we've all seen. Big, starring Tom Hanks. Pleasantville. I don't know if anybody, a lot of people have seen that movie, but I really do love Pleasantville and think it's a great movie. Seabiscuit, another movie that's kind of under his repertoire. He's definitely these two men definitely have other films under their repertoire, and they're I was kind of surprised to learn that. So if you get a chance, go look at their IMDb credits whenever you have a moment. This movie stars Kevin Kline in the titular role of Dave as Dave Kovac. He also plays President Mitchell, and I'll if you've not seen this movie, I'll explain why he has two roles in this movie. Sigourney Weaver plays Ellen Mitchell, the First Lady. Frank Langella plays Bob Alexander, the Chief of Staff. Alan Reed plays Kevin Dunn. I don't remember exactly what his role is in the movie, but he's like in the chief of staff world. He might be the press secretary, honestly. Charles Grodin's in here as Murray Bloom, a friend of Dave. Ving Rhames plays Dwayne Stevenson, one of the Secret Service men that is kind of attached to Dave. And then there are several cameos in this movie or light roles in this movie where these people have definitely went on to have bigger ones. Ben Kingsley, of course, huge in a very, very small role in this as the vice president. Laura Linney plays Randy, one of the president's secretaries or assistants. Stephen Root is in this. Bonnie Hunt has a very tiny role as a tour guide. Arnold Schwarzenegger makes a cameo in this. Other political, like Ben Stein, who kind of a controversial figure, I think now, but he was kind of in this political world. He's also famous for the Bueller scene in Ferris Bueller. He's the teacher in that, so you may recognize him. Oliver Stone, a famous director for directing movies like JFK, Born on the Fourth of July, Platoon, things like that. And Oliver Stone, a big conspiracy theorist. He has a kind of a funny bit in this movie as well. And then Jay Leno. And then there are tons of real political figures from this time in here. There's actually probably more real politicians in this, real congressmen in this from 1992, 93 era that are in this too, then there are actually speaking roles, starring roles of people not playing themselves in this. So now that I've kind of given you a brief summary of who's in this movie, I'll go ahead and jump into what it's about. So, shifty White House Chief of Staff Bob Alexander hatches a scheme to use a double for the president at a public photo opportunity. Small business owner Dave Kovac fits the bill, but after the president suffers a debilitating stroke, opportunist Alexander arranges for Dave to step in full time without even informing the First Lady. It doesn't take long before the press, the nation, and the president's wife realize something is different. This movie had a budget of $28 million, and it ended up making about $92 million at the box office. This has a Rotten Tomatoes score of 95%. It might be the highest on the list. I can't remember what Groundhog Day had on this, but I believe it 95% is one of the highest that we've seen here. So very loved by critics. I'm actually going to look that up, see what Groundhog Day got while we're here. And it also has a IMDb rating of 8.1, or I believe that's what Groundhog Day is. Groundhog Day was a 94%. So Dave comes in as the higher ranking one on Rotten Tomatoes. Take that for whatever you want. The IMDb rating, however, for this, which is more user-driven, not so much about critics, it's about you and me, has a much lower score of 6.9 out of 10. And we'll talk about some of that and why people might grade this a little bit lower than maybe some critics and things. So I'll give you a couple reviews around that. The plot unfolds with elements that would be at home in a Frank Capra movie, which Reitman crosses here with some sly political satire. But the heart of this film is really the relationship between Dave and the First Lady, who wander about their cavernous and lonely quarters in the White House like a couple of moonstruck teenagers. That was Roger Ebert, and he actually gave this a 3.5 out of 4 stars. So Roger really loved this one. I tried to find some negative reviews during the time. Found a couple of them. Most of them were around the same as this, so I listed this one here. It says, as Klein begins to take his presidential duties seriously, the comedy seeps out. A listless civic mindedness drifts in like fog off the Potomac, and that's Leah Rosen of People magazine. And so I think that's a little bit of why some people didn't warm up to it. I was going to have Spencer on this week to talk about that. He unfortunately had some other plans, but I do know that he had a much lower grade on this score than or on his score of this film than I did. And I love this movie. My reaction, I've seen this movie so many times. This is a VHS that I played time and time again as a child. I could not tell you what it was about this movie that led a 6, 7, 8 year old child to really fall in love with this movie. Maybe it is the fact that it's like just a regular Joe that can be president and actually is doing good uh, for the country in this. But I got a couple people in chat saying, "What does Spencer know?" And Spencer, I hope if you see this later, you take these two messages to heart and really think about your life right now and think about all those people that you're disappointing out there, including me. So, yeah, I think I love this movie. It really is a comfort movie for me. I love Kevin Kline in this movie. This movie gives me warm, fuzzy feelings, and like you know that we can actually do something in our country to make those changes. Like we complicate politics too much in this country, and if this normal Joe figured it out, why can't we figure it out? So a little bit that's my initial reaction to this movie that I've seen time and time again, and will continue to watch this film for years to come. So let's go ahead and break down some of these scenes, some of these movies. And Rbax 99, I know that you've seen this movie. You were talking about how much you really liked this movie. So please feel free to jump in if there's some things that I miss when I'm going through this, or some scenes that you remember, or lines that you remember. Please feel free to jump in with some of your stuff here. Okay, so this is a good one. So this movie's all about using a double, and somebody in chat just said, also makes me wonder how often a double is used in public. So I do know that in the little bit of research that I did, that this has happened before, um, way back in like 1919. There was a president that had suffered a stroke, and they were talking about whether or not he could continue, or if they wanted the vice president in there, and so they kind of kept that a secret. But I do know that the doubles have been used in rare circumstances, and not in America. There's also Saddam Hussein famously used doubles all over. They even made I think they made a movie about that called like The King's Double, or um, something about Saddam's double. But yeah, it does make you wonder how often a double really is used in public, and uh, what we see on it. It would be really hard though, if to pull off the double in today's time, just because we've got HD cameras out there. Everybody's looking at they're looking at these things. I mean, I think I saw it when Trump was president, and this is not getting political, so if any political things, please keep those out. Please keep those out of the comments. But yeah, Donald Trump, when he was president, the first lady, a lot of people thought that Melania was a double, and they would like pick apart these different things, and like, oh, how they're holding their hands or anything. I think it'd be really difficult to do now, and I think it would have been really difficult to use them. But I'm sure that we've definitely seen doubles used in public, where for those far away shots, somebody's trying to get away. We can see the back of somebody's head, so I'm sure somebody's used that. So I have a fun fact you may already know. A lot of people think the voice on the Arby's commercials is James Earl Jones, but it's actually Ving Rhames. I did not know who the voice of the Arby's commercial is, but I am glad to know that it is Ving Rhames. Ving Rhames, I really love him in this movie. He has a bit of fun in this movie, and then the next year he gets to be in Pulp Fiction in a very serious and interesting role. But I love Ving Rhames in this movie. So he's used so well, and he gets to have that really heartwarming scene at the end of this that we'll talk about. But we'll go ahead and talk about it. So we get introduced to this movie. You get, to see Washington, and we're introduced to the president and his wife, the first lady, Ellen. And you can tell already from the start that he is cold. His business as usual. He doesn't really care. Like their relationship, you are already kind of feeling that they're not as into each other as they probably used to be, and that this is a job, and things happen like that. Like you get all of that from the introduction to the president, and he's pretty much business as usual with his staff. And then we get an introduction to Dave, who comes off at we first see Dave at a car dealership where he's pretending to be the president. He comes in riding on a pig, so he's goofy, he's friendly, and he does these like appearance things as doubling as the president to make a couple extra bucks because his other job is he works for a temp agency and he helps people find jobs. So we're already establishing the two different people here, and how even though they're both played by Kevin Kline, these are very different characters here. Um, the whole reason that we're introduced to both of these is because of this double that we're talking about here. The president has a big speech that he's giving tonight, and he wants to go somewhere else and needs a double to essentially exit the speech and get in a car. And that's where they find Dave, who looks exactly like the president. I think they tried a little bit and it's not good enough to make the president and Dave look a little different. Kevin Kline has a noticeable like mole on his cheek, and the president has that, and they tried to like hide it with Dave, and they don't always do it. So they tried, but they didn't really try. Um, and so we get this speech. They hire Dave. The Secret Service um, show up at his house, and they tell him that we have a job for you to do for your country, kind of thing. They kind of sucker him into it. Uh, so Dave agrees, and he goes to this speech, and he's getting all made up. He's getting the hair done, the hair colored a little bit, and cut and dressed up, and that's where we get Dave's first appearance as the president. And the president gets to meet him as he's done with his speech and everything. And uh, Dave's looking there, and he meets the president face to face, and it's I couldn't tell where the seams are in the scene, but they've obviously done this in other things where there are twins or movies like that where you have somebody that looks the exact same as the other. But it looks pretty real. You could almost believe that Kevin Kline is two different people in this. And we get a line from the president that says, "You're a very handsome man." And he says, "Thank you, Mr. President." And then he says, "Lose the smile. You look like a schmuck." So again, we get that somebody said in the chat, impressed how Kevin Kline make you believe that they are individual characters. He does a really good job. I really wish we had more Kevin Kline movies, especially in the '90s. He was kind of he would pick and choose. He picks and chooses his roles very carefully. Um, he does a lot of like Shakespearean acting. He does a lot of theater work. So we don't see him in the movies as much as we probably should. And he's a great comedic actor. I think he was even nominated. He might have even won an Oscar for his work in A Fish Called Wanda, where he was playing a very different character from this, kind of a con man. And Dave's kind of a con man, but he's like a dumb con man. Like he doesn't even know that he's not even in on the true con that's here. But Dave, accepts this role and goes down, and all he's supposed to do is walk to the car, but he's so excited, he unleashes that "God bless you, God bless America" speech to line to all of the crowd. It really pumps up the crowd, and they rush him into the limo, and it's a great comic scene there with Dave really hamming it up because it's probably going to be his only opportunity, or so you think. Because the president, the real president, is actually at a hotel right now with one of his press secretary, or yeah, one of his secretaries, and who played by Laura Linney. And this is a little before its time. I don't think it was as well known. This is definitely before Monica Lewinsky and any big scandals with Bill Clinton at his time. There were always rumors. There were always during his campaign, Clinton's campaign, there were all this about other women and stuff. But this, like in the White House stuff, this was all fairly new, and not a lot of people um, had this on their minds seeing this. So it was completely like, oh yeah, this is a fantasy movie. This doesn't happen in real life. But in this case, the president was sleeping with one of his secretaries, and he has a stroke mid coitus, I guess you would say, and a very severe stroke. So big of a stroke that Bob Alexander, Frank Langella, in a great villain role for him. I don't see him playing anything else other than a villain. And this movie kind of ruined him for me as an actor. He was just so good at being a villain in this that uh, if he showed up in anything as a nice guy, I would be like, nope, that's wrong. But anyway, Bob comes up with this great plan so that he can essentially take over the presidency by blaming the vice president for this scandal that actually him and the president were a part of. And that way he can get rid of the vice president. And then Dave can assign Bob this new vice president role. And then we'll kill Dave off and not really kill him off, but we'll have the president not able to perform, and then Bob Alexander walks into the presidency. So they come up with this, and they're going to use Dave to do this. And so they bring him back to the White House. They let him sit in the Oval Office in the chair and explain everything to him and make him feel like, you have to do this as an American citizen. Like, you are the most important person right now to the country. And then they give him this whole thing about like he says this is illegal, and he's like, well, have you ever run a red light before? Let's say you're trying to get somebody to the hospital. Would you run that red light? And he's like, yeah, yeah, of course. And he's like, the country is sick, and you're going to get it to the hospital. So they kind of bribe him into doing this and saying it's for their country. Again, Dave is um, just kind of clueless at this point. He doesn't really understand all the ramifications of what it takes. He just knows I'm doing this for my country. So, um, and that's going to be his motivation moving forward. Maybe I can do some good while I'm in this role. I can be a president and I can make these decisions. So he go ahead and he agrees to it. The country is informed that the president did have a stroke, but it's a minor stroke, so that gives them time to get Dave practice. There's montage of him learning how to be president and doing some of these presidential things, playing with his dog, going to a factory, which is the basis for my line about I once caught a fish this big. Anybody that's seen this movie knows that scene where he's got the like mechanical arms and everything. Um, there's montage of him memorizing his cabinet members, and they also, after all this, like he gets a clean bill of health from his doctor, and then they show this scene where they bring him into the press room that we've all seen, and brings up this podium scene. It's a really poignant scene. If you haven't seen this movie, you can check it out on YouTube. It's one of the scenes that I think it's actually like Hands on the Podium is what the scene's called. But Dave stands up there and he starts giving a speech that he has memorized of the actual president, and he's correcting them on like how he actually gives speeches and how much he's studied this guy, and it really kind of soaks you into like, oh, these regular people, like we actually do connect to people, these regular people out there that see these things, and they also see like we've got a ringer here. This is, he's a dead-on ringer for the president. So you see Bob and Alan realize how good Dave is going to be in this role, and I think Bob actually has more intentions of him to, do his bidding while he's in this role, but that all gets foiled as he continues to be the president. After that, we get another great scene where we meet his wife, or he meets his wife for the first time, and they do a on the balcony scene where they're supposed to hold hands and just speak to the press really shortly. And they told him the only thing that he's allowed to say or that he needs to say to the first lady is "Thanks for doing this, Helen." And I'm pretty sure he says it 3 times in the scene, and it pisses off Ellen. She tells him to go to hell, and they're all excited about that because that gets the first lady out of their business. They don't have to worry about anything. So we get that establishment that they hate each other, and that keeps the plan going full motion. A couple other scenes that I want to point out is there's a sandwich scene with Dwayne, who's the Secret Service person. Speaking of Arby's, there's a lot of like cold cuts in this scene. Dave is really good at making sandwiches, I guess, and he makes a sandwich for him and Dwayne, Dwayne's Secret Service, and he's talking to him about, do the president and the first lady, have they always hated each other? And Dwayne, just replies with, "I can't say," because Dave's just some normal guy to him. And then he also asks him about being a Secret Service agent and if he's really going to take a bullet for the president of the United States. And Dwayne replies with, "Yes, yeah, I would." And then he asks him, "Would you take a bullet for me? I'm not the president, so would you take a bullet for me?" And then you don't get an answer there. So a little bit more on that later. And then we get to another scene where this is kind of in that montage of Dave becoming, more presidential and becoming Bill Mitchell. And we have this homeless shelter scene where when he walks in, or before he even walks in, he's riding in the car with his wife, and she notices a few things about him right off the bat, but mostly he looks at her legs, like her dress her skirt kind of flaps away, and he sees her slip or whatever, and he looks at the first lady's legs, like he's actually like attracted to her, and so sirens are going off in the first lady's head, like, my husband doesn't look at me like that, which is very sad, but my husband doesn't look at me like that, so there's something weird going on here. And she, they're just talking in the car about how much he doesn't care about any of this homeless shelter, and this is all for show. And then when they actually walk into the homeless shelter, and Dave realizes that this is a homeless shelter that is mostly children, and he finds a lonely child named David. He says that's a great name, and he just has a moment with these kids. He even tells the press to go away. The press like circle in on that moment, and he tells the press to go away. And he does this magic trick for this child, and warms up to this child. And again, this is tipping off the first lady. This guy ain't right. I've never seen my husband do magic before. I've never seen him be nice to people before. So there's something going on here. And we get a little bit more clues in the coming scenes where the first lady definitely catches on to Dave not being her husband. Um, there is some political stuff that happens in the background here, where Bob signs a bill Bill Mitchell or under Bill Mitchell, president's name, and where it essentially cuts the funding to this homeless shelter that they showed in this, and the president's wife comes to confront him while he's in the shower. Of course, this is Dave in the shower, and one of the funnier things is when I was a child, I would sing this song. He's singing his own version of "Hail to the Chief," and at one point he's like, "He's got the power, that's why he's in the shower." He just sings these lyrics. It's really great. Again, if you want to see some of these scenes, they are on. I do know they're on YouTube if you can't find the movie to watch yourself, but. Ellen confronts him here, and he has no idea why she's mad at him. She doesn't know, or he doesn't know that he uh, vetoed a bill that took away all that funding for that homeless shelter and other homeless shelters like it. And she tells him to turn around while he's in the shower, and that's when she gets the probably the biggest difference, or the thing that tells her that's not my husband, because she sees his different schwanz, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, she notices that, and I think at that point she's like, "Yep, this guy isn't my husband. Something weird's going on here." But Dave, finds out about this veto that he didn't do, and he, takes a little bit more of the presidential stance, like he actually is the president here, and Bob tells him that if he can cut $650 million from the United States budget, he can keep his stupid homeless shelter. Well, Dave takes that to heart. He gets his friend Murray to come in, played by the wonderful Charles Grodin. At this time, I only knew Charles Grodin from the Beethoven movies, but Charles Grodin's been a wonderful, comedic actor for years. And I can't remember. I think he was on 60 Minutes as well as a reporter on there. So Charles Grodin, very funny, very hilarious, and wonderful in this scene. Kind of neurotic, kind of this accountant, and doesn't he gets invited to the White House. He finds out about Dave, and Dave asks him if he can balance the budget. It's a great scene, leading to an even better scene where um, Dave introduces this to his cabinet, and they slash that $650 million and keep that homeless shelter afloat and other shelters like it from that portion of the bill that was vetoed. This is also the moment when Bob realizes that he's kind of lost control of his meal ticket to the presidency. Uh, the few scenes down, we get Ellen finding out about Dave, and thank you. Somebody noticed the aquarium in the background. That's my brother-in-law's, his 5 fish that I have to keep alive this week. So thank you for that. I know it's a little bit. I just got a little bit distracted, but thanks for the compliment there. We get a scene where Ellen does find out. She tricks Dave into telling on himself. And she finds out about her husband this way. They go down to where her husband is being kept on life support. He's pretty much a vegetable at this point, and she decides that since her husband is no longer truly the president, that she's going to leave. And Dave has kind of the same feeling, like he just learned what they were like. It just came upon him like what we're doing is probably not the best thing to be doing. So they decide to leave together, and um, they escape through the secret tunnels that we've all heard about in the White House, and how presidents get out to have their affairs and things like that. So this leads to kind of like a first date kind of scene for the president, or for Dave and the first lady. They get to know each other a little bit more, and Dave, he's like, "Oh, I'd love to do this for real," and the first lady's just talking about, how he can do this, and she used to believe in these things too, and they kind of, have a couple moments talking to each other there, and then they get pulled over by the cops during the scene. A very funny scene where they think they're the president and the first lady, but he tells them that they're just impersonators, and that they just came from this thing where they did this skit, and at the end of the skit they sing Tomorrow from Annie, and leads to, Kevin Kline singing Tomorrow at the top of his lungs as the president, and the first lady joins in. It's a really cute scene. Especially when the cop tells Kevin Kline that she needs a little work. She's not good, since she actually is the real First Lady. But then they decide to go back to the White House and change things for the better, and actually kind of end this. Um, Dave actually ends up firing Bob later, and then they start to plan how to get out of the original plan. Um, this leads to kind of the ending of this movie, where Dave addresses the Congress and the country. He takes the blame for controversies that they've tried to pin on the vice president, and then he fakes a stroke. which leads to a body switch, I guess, in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. And this also leads to a very cute scene between Dave and Ving Rhames as they're sitting in the front seat of the ambulance, where Ving Rhames, after they've had a couple sweet moments together, he says he would have taken a bullet for him because he realizes the good that Dave truly does. So. Uh, and this also, we get kind of an epilogue here. Dave gets into some local politics. I think he's running for like city council, and then Ellen comes in at the end, and we see them making out, but in Dave's office before they close the blinds. It's a very cute ending to this movie, very romantic comedy ending to this movie. Some other things that I wanted to point out, if you have any favorite moments or anything that I missed, especially Arbax 99, like I said, I know that you are probably the only person that actually saw this movie of the people that are in here quite frequently. But a couple lines that I wanted to point out here is Dave and Dwayne talking about just Dave scrapbooking at one point, and Dave says, "You ever think about wearing a sweater and make you blend in more?" And Dwayne says, "Sweaters make my neck look too thick." And Dave says, "Even a sweater vest, you could wear a tie." He's like, "You think a sweater vest would look good on me?" I think it's a really really cute scene here. And then at one point during the movie, Dave has to give a cover story about why he's no longer returning to work at his temp agency, and he says he's met a woman and that he's in love and that they're, off gallivanting and living that love life. And he said keeps giving. This is another thing about Dave. He gives too much information. He says she's half Polynesian, half American. She's Amnesian, and I found myself laughing out loud at that scene. Um, so it was really good there. Arbex, you gave a great point, and this is what I think a lot of people have problems with this movie is the like unrealistic nature. Not only would they recognize her as the first lady when she comes in at the end, but through the whole time, like if they get together, which we assume they do in the end, are they not going to go through their lives being like, you married a guy that looks exactly like your husband? Like, that's a little weird. I mean, I guess you like what you like, but that's one of those holes in this movie where I was like, ugh, is she gonna dump him like 6 months later because this is gonna get too weird and she's gonna, see her dead husband's face on this guy? Uh, so that's a little bit weird. Somebody said it's like a more fun version of Summersby. I never loved him the way I love you. It kind of like that. And it I would never have put that together that this is a like a better version of Summersby. Um, but yeah, this really is a better version of Summersby. And so yeah, there obviously this plot is outrageous. There's no way that anybody could have pulled this off. I mean, it would have to be a tight knit operation. There are already too many people that know what is going on, and too many people are involved. They're paying off doctors, nurses, the secretary knows about it, the hotel staff. Like, there's too many people to know or that this isn't going on. But I really do think this is kind of a callback, and I think Roger Ebert said it best when he referenced this being a Frank Capra style film. If you've seen any Frank Capra, that's like It's a Wonderful Life or Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Very kind of like, or Mr. Deeds Comes to Town, like a very aw shucks like guy stepping into these big roles, and just kind of changing the engine from within and showing that we can do this, and if we get serious about stuff like this, that we can make these changes as well. And I think it is really cute on the level. I think this is a good inspirational movie for people to get into politics, and normal people can do this. Normal people start it, all these things. But I do think that there are several. I don't know what Spencer would have said about this, but I'm sure half of the plot holes are probably on his big list of things that he doesn't like it. But Uh, like I said earlier, the couple fun facts about this is it is largely, but this actually happened. Like they're not the doubling thing, but yeah, there was an instance. I guess it's 1919. Woodrow Wilson. He suffered a stroke that left him paralyzed, blind, and incapacitated, and there to this day, people still don't know if he was how seriously injured he was. This ended up, establishing the 25th Amendment, which is, about if the president is not able to perform his job, what happens there. Um, so they kept that back in 1919. They kept that a secret, and Wilson's wife actually was running as the president in his place. So um, very interesting that that actually happened in our day and time. This my favorite political movie. It's up there. I really love this movie. Trying to think of another movie. So there's another movie that comes out I think in '95 called The American President. Um, I love that movie probably differently. I've been talking a lot about romantic comedies lately in my own world, but that one kind of falls more under that. It's more of a romance with a little bit of comedy in it. That movie's up there as well. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is a classic political movie. Again, very cute. And probably unrealistic. It also gives unrealistic expectations of a filibuster and what that is. But um, definitely see that. Wag the Dog is a interesting movie. I'm glad you brought that up. I was going through that when I was looking at other movies like this earlier today. Wag the Dog. JFK is not so much a political movie as more of a like a crime thriller, but with political implications. So that's certainly up there on my list. Uh, Dick, which is a comedy. I think it comes out at the end of the '90s, maybe '99, um, with Michelle Williams and Kirsten Dunst. That's a very fun movie as well. So yeah, out of those, I think those are some of my favorite movies. Long Shot, which actually came out in the last few years, is a great romantic comedy, also political comedy, starring Seth Rogen and Charlize Theron. Um, if you haven't seen that, I think I would suggest that for people. And then like straight up political movies, The Ides of March with George Clooney. That's a really interesting political thriller. And yeah, I think this is definitely this is might be my number one if I'm being completely honest about political movies. Just because I watched it so much as a child and it was a frequent watch. And our it was always in our VCR player. So I love Dave and Kevin Kline especially in this. So some other fun facts about this movie. The Oval Office that we see in this was used more than 25 times for different TV shows and movies, like The Pelican Brief, Clear and Present Danger, Absolute Power, and next week's movie, which I'll get to here at the end. Some other fun facts here. Former presidents Bill Clinton and Barack Obama are big fans of this movie. Clinton has a framed copy of this, or no, Clinton gave the screenwriter of this a framed copy of his own script, which Clinton autographed. He thought it was a funny movie. Um, Clinton also gave Ross a picture of himself holding a Dave mug. Obama told Kevin Kline that I love watching this movie when I'm depressed because you make the job of president look so fun and so easy. Which another thing is like how fun and easy did it look to be president? And is like we could do it, yeah, sure. Kevin Kline got the part after Warren Beatty and Kevin Costner turned it down. Nicolas Cage, Harrison Ford, Michael J. Fox, Mel Gibson, Tom Hanks, and Tom Cruise were also considered. Now, out of all of those actors, and one, I think Kevin Kline's the perfect person in this role. Um, I don't. Again, Warren Beatty, Kevin Costner. I think they're Harrison Ford definitely, or Mel Gibson definitely. I think are a little bit too serious for this role. Tom Hanks, I think, obviously could have pulled this off. Nicolas Cage would have been an interesting one. Michael J. Fox was very young, or would have looked very young in the part for this, even though he's probably like the same age as Kevin Kline at this point. But Michael J. Fox would have been an interesting one. He is actually in that The American President, which I was talking about earlier. So he's in this a couple years later. So he gets his presidential movie. Sigourney Weaver's hair is short because she actually had shaved her head previously for a movie, the third Alien movie in that franchise. So that's why Sigourney Weaver's got really short hair in this movie. Um, I don't really have any other fun facts about this. There were several in there, but not as interesting as some of our other films that we've watched and talked about. But how I could have made this better, I don't know. I think it's a pretty wonderful movie. If you get, lost in the plot holes and ways that this can never work, you're not going to enjoy like the wholesome nature, the sweetness around this movie. Kevin Kline is so wonderful in this movie. I don't think I would have recast him. Um, I honestly wish that we had more stuff with Kevin Kline like this. I think we get another one in a couple years with In and Out. I think that's a pretty great movie. Um, that is kind of slept on, uh, but it's a really interesting '90s movie. Kevin Kline's just great. Um, and yeah, I think it is weird that Ellen ends up with Dave, even though she looks like her husband. But I don't care because I fall for it. Like I would rather Ellen, who is this nice, sweet person, end up with nice, sweet Dave. So haters, back off. Screw them. So I gave this movie 4 stars out of 5. And I'm a little bit biased. I mean, that's probably a higher score than it honestly deserves. But um, again, haters back off. I don't really care, Spencer. That goes out to you. So um, I don't know if anybody has any questions or anything regarding this, but that's kind of where I end up with Dave. I do recommend this movie. I would recommend this movie to anybody that's looking for a fun, easy watch and something that's again very saccharine, very sweet. It's a good Sunday afternoon under the covers movie to watch. So if you're feeling like it, if you can find it to watch, I definitely recommend it for your Sunday afternoon. So. But if we don't have a lot of things other to talk about here with this, I will go ahead and let everybody know about next week's movie. It's gonna be an interesting movie. It's a comedy, um, and it's a sequel. It's the first sequel that might be the only sequel we're doing this year. If we were to do this movie, or if we were to do the same podcast in 60 years, everything would be a sequel or a franchise movie. But the next movie we'll be doing is called Hot Shots Part 2. It's a parody movie. Charlie Sheen and fun of more of the it's making fun of more of like Rambo or Apocalypse Now esque style, whereas the first Hot Shots movie was making fun of Top Gun and those kinds of movies. So it's a fun one. I actually love the Hot Shots movies and would quote them when I was young, and probably shouldn't have seen some of these. Uh, as there's a little bit of more adult humor in these films, but it's a great movie, and I look forward to talking with you and with a guest about this next week. So I hope you all have a good and wonderful rest of your Sunday, and I'll talk to you all next time. Thanks so much.